Austin and I had about gentrification, declining home and business ownership, and lack of financial resources and education available in our community. Thus, we present BWAARP. These workshops feature qualified and concerned financial and well-being experts that educate, motivate, and inspire us to attain, retain, and pass down legacy wealth. Our short-term goal is to close that wealth gap between white and Black households, while our long-term vision is to help fulfill the Los Angeles Urban League's desire to rebuild Black Wall Street right here in Los Angeles and throughout the country. I want to thank our partner, the Los Angeles Urban League, for their commitment and tremendous support of BWAARP. And in the coming weeks, you're going to hear topics like joining the Smart Investors Club, preserving your assets in tough times, crypto, should we cash in or cash out? And last but not least, the wealthy mind and body. We all know without a sound mind and body, no amount of money can make us happy. So as we near our conclusion for Black History Month, tonight's presentation shines a light on Black Wall Street and the Black history of money. We're all too aware of how history of economic discrimination combined with social injustice has prevented the greater Black community from attaining and living that so-called American dream. Our presenter is Serria Rego. She's a registered representative for Transamerica Financial Advisors, Inc. Serria builds her practice by prospecting with professional associations such as the LA County Bar Association, Small Business Association, and the Minority Business Opportunity Council. She obtained her Bachelor of Science in Finance from Bradley University and is the founder of Black Wealth Matters, an educational series that describes the ways Black wealth is impacted by systemic racism and ways that we can fight it. As you have questions throughout the evening, just put them in the chat or the Q&A, and our producer, Jacinda Moten, will make sure you get an answer during the Q&A portion of this program. Serria, welcome to BWAARP.
Hello, everyone. Good evening. My name is Serria Rego. I'm so happy to be here. Thank you so much, Reverend Smith. Thank you, Miss Shirley, if you're out there, for the introduction to Reverend Smith. And I'm looking forward to sharing this story and a little bit about me. So I'm going to start here. So we're going to talk today about money and Black history and how it really intercepts. And we're going to talk a little bit about why this conversation is important, because I do believe that as upwardly mobile people, we do have to think bigger and plan bigger. And I know we can end systemic racism, but it's going to have to be a group effort, and it's going to have to be all hands on deck. So my background is I'm from Chicago, born and raised. My family's from Mississippi. And I'm from a hardworking Midwest family. My grandma, who's in the middle with the Santa Claus hat before she passed, she would tell us to work hard. You know, working hard was the answer for everything. Just work really hard. The problem was that we worked hard. Well, I saw my family working hard, but I never saw them having any money or wealth. Everyone always struggled. And so when I went to college, I was the first person in my family to go to college. I didn't know anything about college. My mom worked at a factory. My aunt worked at a bakery. My uncles worked for Ford Motor Mechanics. So there was nothing I knew. I didn't even know what majors were there. So I ended up going into college being a doctor, because that's what the Cosby Show and all the TV shows that had Black folks on it, they were doctors or lawyers. And I was like, okay, well, I guess I'll be a doctor. Couldn't afford college because, again, we didn't plan. We didn't know how to plan, and ended up doing a personality test, and everything led to finance. And I'm so happy it did. Now, one of the interesting things about my grandmother is that my grandmother could not read. And I did not understand why she couldn't read, because she was a little older than my other friends, but not that much older. And most of them could read, I thought, but I don't know. I didn't ask, but my grandmother couldn't read. And when I would ask her about it, she would say we were working in the fields. And my brain just didn't understand what that meant. So I kind of like, I didn't understand history. So I dismissed it. And she said that she wasn't allowed to work. She wasn't allowed to go to school because they were working in the fields. And then she would fault herself for being stupid and not knowing how to read. And I'll tell you what I learned about that later. But my goal and my intention is to really minimize the wealth gap through education, because I think one of the biggest things that is happening right now in America is people just don't want to learn real American history. They want to whitewash it, they want to clean it up, and it's just not that. And the reality is, for Black Americans, there's no history. It's all still present day. You know, for everything that you think was historic, I can point to something that's happening today. If you think lynchings stopped, we know they didn't. If we think hostility from the government stopped, we know it didn't. So nothing has changed. And if nothing has changed, what do we do to fix it? And I believe one of the first things that we have to do is understand. So I started with my own self-education, just trying to understand money. How could you be in the finance world and not understand money? And when I say understand money, y'all, I mean, I wanted to know like everybody's money. I wanted to know what the Romans used for money. I wanted to know like just the whole creation of money from start to finish in different cultures at different times. And you can't reach America in history and not have slavery, because without slavery, America wouldn't have money. And everything was built on slavery. Credit, banking, everything was built on the backs of Black folks. I had no idea. And when I started going down that rabbit hole, then I wanted to understand more about who founded the country and then the system. And during that time, George Floyd was murdered. But before I do that, let's also talk a little bit about my background before I go into what I'm so passionate about, which is just explaining history and the correlation. So I look at the world through a very interesting lens. So I have the degree in finance. I'm from a single mom, and then I had the pleasure of experiencing luxury as a model. So I got to travel the world and be around a lot of wealthy people. Now, once I'm around these wealthy people and I'm asking them questions, because I'm still thinking from a finance standpoint, what I realized is that they were doing everything completely opposite of what I was taught to do for my clients as a finance major and a financial professional, right? So I thought, well, if these people are doing that, then my job is to understand more of that and just to teach people to do what they're doing, just use the path that was already created. What I didn't understand was that the path that was created and the path that they were on was not the path that will work the best for us, because I didn't understand that we were different, right? And that's the trick of America, to pretend like we're not different. I don't see color, you guys are the same, but that's just not true. So I worked for several companies, learning how money works once I retired out of modeling, and all of the companies had different barriers for people to get in. They would have it where you had to live in a certain neighborhood, like Hancock Park, right? They would have it where you had to pay a certain amount in order to even talk to someone. They had all of these barriers that if you're not paying attention, it just looks like that's the criteria. But when you look at it through the lens of how systemic racism impacts Black communities, you realize that that's how the financial sector functions in their role in systemic racism, is just through access. So once I found a company, the company I'm with now, that actually allowed me to work with people who were not relegated to one neighborhood, who could work with me and not pay a $2,000 fee just to have me have a conversation, I got excited. I went to Chicago and opened up an office, and in that office I had my friends from college, my cousins. I opened up a Black, predominantly Black firm, and that's always been a dream of mine. But fast forward, I moved back to California. And when I moved back to California, it was around the time that Barack Obama was leaving presidency, and then we had the Trump era. And during that time, it was a bunch of killings with with our Black men, and it was very stressful. And then fast forward, 2020 happened. And I couldn't take it. I was like, what is going on? Me and my team, we were out there marching, and it was scary because people who were protesting were getting hurt. It was too much, and we continued to do it. But I thought that there was another way that we can add value. And all the information that I had been learning about American history, I wanted to expose it, because I thought, if I don't know this information and I'm educated and I'm well-traveled, who else doesn't know this information? And that's how the Black Wealth series was started. And the interesting thing about 2020 is that we all have our triggers of what we remember about George Floyd. We all have them. Like, some mothers remember that he called his mother. Some men remember that it was 6 of them on him. Like, everybody has their thing. But what stood out to me was that he was murdered over $20. $20. And then I thought about when I was younger, and I remember my family not having $20. I remember, like, I don't have 20, you could borrow 5, you could borrow 10, but people in my family were working full time and they didn't have that $20. And it just made me look very closely at the impacts of systemic racism on our wealth. So the first book that I was able to start analyzing it, besides a book called White Trash about the history of our founding fathers, was a book called Black Fortune. And Black Fortune covers the first 6 Black millionaires out of slavery during Reconstruction. And what was so amazing was that they were a little bit before Tulsa. They were right out of slavery. People always think that Madam C.J. Walker was one of the people. She was not. Her mentor, the person who started the hair business, was. It was 3 women, 3 men. They all had different ways of hiding who they were, especially the women, because the women were not only women, but they were Black. So they would have either white face and cover up their face when they were out and about in areas where the wealthy were able to be, or they would have a person construct or doing all their business deal. They would have a business partner who was not as smart as them, nothing of what they were, but he was that white face that would ensure that they didn't get taken advantage of and all that good stuff. Because during that time, you can rob someone, you can take their property, and they couldn't take you to court. Black folks couldn't sue anyone. And when the biggest takeaway is that when all of those people died that were the subjects of that book, none of their wealth was transferred to their family. None of it. Little. Like, they all found different ways. People found different ways to take their money with no consequence. The lady who was who had her business partner, a white guy business partner, being her face, his wife came after her when he passed, right? And it was story after story where their wealth wasn't able to create that generational wealth. But we can look at that today too with Bruce's speech. And so we fast forward a little bit more, and I got to Tulsa, Oklahoma. Now, Tulsa, Oklahoma was such an interesting city because the government, of course, didn't give them any money, right? They were paying taxes like everybody else, but the government didn't give them any money. So they had like dirt roads, very little lights on the street. It was just, they did the best that they can do, but they were ignored by the local government financially. And they thrived. They were phenomenal. I mean, really upwardly mobile, everything from banks to schools to hotels. The number one doctor in America, who was a Black man, lived in that area. It was just a phenomenal area. And what ended up happening to destroy it, and if we all just think logically, it was going to get destroyed at some point in time anyway, right? If it wasn't that situation, it was going to be something else, because that's what happened to upwardly mobile, financially sound Black folks. They got destroyed. That's part of the system, whether it's our government creating legislation to financially impact us, or the boots of the ground, fire lynching us or grabbing us out of our beds and shooting up our homes. We got the two. We deal with the two. We're sandwiched in beneath, but it's all rooted in white supremacy. They just have different tools of how they enact it. So Tulsa was upwardly mobile. A young man went into a building, and this is the story that I read, and I actually read it in Black Fortunes too, by the way. The young man was in the elevator with a young lady who worked in the elevator. Apparently she screamed, and then the assumption was that the little boy did something to her. We all know that boy knew better. But that was the story. She cried it, and that got a lot of people killed during that time. So of course, an angry mob goes to grab the young man, but there was a little bit of a relationship with the Black patrons and the white town's sheriff. So they go to grab this young man, and they're negotiating with the sheriff because they're saying you're not gonna be allowed to kill him. But the people in the town obviously wanted that little boy lynched. So they're saying, we're going to lynch him tonight. So the town ends up going, and they're armed. A lot of them served in the military and things of that nature. They had weapons. They go break the little boy out of the jail. The angry mob is out there. There is stories that somebody shot and there was a shootout. But either way, they got back to the town. And that's when all hell broke loose. So Tulsa, people were shooting, there were bombs dropped. It was it was a blitz, it was a war on this neighborhood. And there are a few different things that stands out to me from that conversation. The first one is that people don't own bombs. The government does, right? So somehow the government was able to not only have a supremacist convince everyone that it's cool to drop a bomb on this group, but then afterwards, everyone who survived left. One of my speakers for the Black Wealth series, her grandmother was one of the escapees. A lot of them went to Northern California. And what's interesting about that, by the way, the reason why she was a speaker was because she was talking about how the environment in Black areas can be attacked. So her daughter, the person who escaped, her daughter, which was my friend's mother, ended up having bad asthma along with everyone else because they were dropping chemicals on that Black area of the people who ran from Tulsa. So the people who escaped, a lot of them died, their bodies were hidden, the story was buried, and then folks went and moved into their houses. The folks from the other town went and moved into their houses, right? Into this area that they didn't deem good enough for nobody. They didn't even put street lamps on the area, and they moved into their houses. But what I know is this, and this is what I know from just being in the industry. If you had to take a guess, would you guess that most of those people in Tulsa had life insurance and insurance on their property? I would, right? Because they were educated, they were smart, they did exactly what they were supposed to be doing. They did. But if you also had to take a guess, do you think that any of those companies paid out? Right? So that's one of the biggest impacts of being upwardly mobile and the history of America, is that when you did well financially, people were running and gunning for you, whether they were trying to cheat you out of your money, or they were trying to stop your voice, because money equals influence for everyone, Black folks included. So what I learned after that was that in Barack Obama's book, The Audacity of Hope, I thought that lynchings were just sporadic. They would be like 14-year-olds. I thought every lynching was like a little baby boy, like an Emmett Till. Not so. Lynchings, the majority of lynchings were with Black business owners, people who had influence, they had voices, they did well, they had some power, but not enough to keep them alive. They were lynched. And the same thing happened to the people integrating neighborhoods, the wealthy, the Black version of our wealthy, going into these middle income white neighborhoods, because they couldn't go into the high income white neighborhoods because they would never stand for it. So the middle income white neighborhoods with the blue collars and our white collared professionals, doctors, et cetera, moving into these neighborhoods, and same thing happening. Properties getting taken, can't defend themselves, can't do anything but sit there and either get their property burned, get drug out, get their property shot up, story after story of that. So what that created is just, it created a period where we were working, but we didn't have anything to show for it because it was taken. But I don't know if it's necessarily I don't know if it's changed now though, because if you look at Bruce's Beach, where this family did everything that they thought they should be doing, which is buying property, following the laws, they moved their property so far out of the way, which is what the LA County told them to do. LA County told them to do, and then their land still gets taken, and then it gets sold back for pennies on the dollar. So that's the problem with our conversation in terms of wealth. The foundation of the problem is the system. The system at any given point in time has the ability to turn around and grab us. So let's go back to my grandmother. My grandma's from Mississippi, and she couldn't read. And because I was finally reading and learning about Black history, I realized that Mississippi was just like Texas in the sense that it was its own country. She couldn't read because the local government had the kids in the fields. Even though slavery was over, it wasn't over in Mississippi. It was so hard for people to even just function as professionals, and just as families, they ended up having to escape. So how does this apply? So this applies to present day, because you guys, I feel like the trick and the joke of America is to pretend like we've changed and something has happened. Nothing has happened and we have not changed. The only thing that happens is they blur our history so that we have to make a conscious effort to see what was going on yesterday and how it's being how it's being created today. Whether it's a technology system, it's through the universities, it's through redlining, it's through the medical system, and our Black women can't have babies. It's just a matter of what is it today, because systemic racism has not been eliminated. And when I say systemic racism, what I mean is giving people the power to weaponize an industry that they choose to be a part of. And that's what happens when we don't change our mindsets and educate ourselves about how it all works. A white supremacist in anything is weaponized. A white supremacist in the EPA is weaponized. You don't have clean water. A white supremacist in the education system is weaponized. They're taking assets and blocking the people out. I mean, I can go on, but every industry is weaponized until we eliminate it. My hypothesis is that we can eliminate it through wealth, and also through being intentional, and through minimizing systemic racism in our industry. The main thing that we all have to do is stop it where it is for us. We have to understand how systemic racism functions in our sectors and really quietly work to eliminate it. Right? And that might look like getting more people houses if you're in real estate or mortgages. It might look like getting more people investments and policies if you're in finance. It might look like making sure your clients get the same treatment, your hospital patients get the same treatment if you're a nurse or a doctor. It might look like, it can look like whatever it looks like, but systemic racism is the foundation of everything in our system, because we're still a society built on slavery that has not clean that up for themselves internally. Another thing that I have to remember in my industry, and I guess this is in every industry, a lot of times there's distrust, but that distrust has been earned by usually everything, whether it's relationships with cops or whatever, it's earned. So the first Black bank was Freedman Banks. And I think Reverend Smith, you said something, there were rich slaves. Absolutely. Black folks, even during slavery, were able to save money. And when this Freedmen Bank opened, people put their money in there. And the two guys that were running the bank, they put their money in there thinking it was a government sanctioned institution. And honestly, all banks are regulated by the government. So the fact that they're pretending that it wasn't is really just another part of the problem. The two guys that owned this bank invested the money poorly, and no one was held responsible. So all of their life savings gone. And then we also know banks are predatory. There's a book called How the Other Half Banks that talks about how if a person is poor, a bank is more expensive than payday loans. Banks are not necessarily set up for people who are also dealing with the effects of systemic racism and poverty. And of course, we know the real estate industry, everyone says buy a house, buy a house, buy a house. We know of stories where people their homes are devalued because they know they're Black. They get a higher mortgage rate because they know they're Black. They can't sell it for the same amount or get it appraised because they know they're Black. So all of those areas need to change. So it's very important to understand that. And it's also important to have people around you that understand that. You got to be careful having a CPA and a financial advisor and a lawyer that says things like, we don't see color. Because if they're saying stupid stuff like that today, then they're not going to be part of your solution. They'll be part of your problem. So my wish list, before I let Reverend Smith ask any questions, is we got to end systemic racism by just really being one unit. We're not a lot. We're only 13%, but we have to, that 13% needs to be a fist. It needs to be a fist where we're all together, whether it's our voting, our financially backing people. It has to be that one unit. Otherwise, it's too easy to pick us off and have us disappear, right? Also, we got to utilize our organizations. One of the great things about being Black is that we have communities. You guys are part of this community, whether it's the NAACP, Jack and Jill, your sororities, fraternities. We have community. They're our lifeline. They're how we stay alive, literally. But we need to utilize those communities to create wealth. We're not doing it. We're utilizing them for brunch, for happy hour, for talk. We need to take it up a notch. How we can do that is the communities can put a little bit more skin in the game. It could be a win-win. Consider, even for the Urban League, what would it look like if you guys had a program where everyone could get guaranteed group life insurance of $1 million? And then they endow 2% of that to you. That's killing two birds with one stone. We know we need some more insurance as a group. And now that'll help support the organization so that they can keep going. I would also love to see that with churches, with universities, with sororities, fraternities. Why can't we do the same thing that companies do and provide group benefits for our members? Nobody does community the way we do community. If we were quietly leveraging those community organizations, no one can hate on them, right? Because what they naturally do is they hate on anything that smells Black. Community organizations, you're like, yeah, I want group insurance. Oh, really? Like the AARP? Absolutely. Just like the AARP, except it's the NAACP. Absolutely. And do it that way. We have to secretly own assets. Let me tell you why that is. So my biggest takeaway from the Black fortunes is that they hid the money trail. They hid the money trail. Why that's important today is because we don't have enough repercussions for people who financially interrupt us, right? So if someone is valuing our house at $500,000 when it's really $1 million house, they're not going to go to jail for that. So what do we have to do until we can financially support and change the legislation with enough of us in there or enough people that think like us to change it? We have to not let them know that we own the house. We have to hide the paper trail. All right. And then of course, we do have to change the system. The system is the government. All right, you guys, that's me. That's my portion. And Reverend Smith wants to ask some questions now. You guys, if you want to have a conversation with me, I would love it. Just set some time. It can be about whatever you want. If you want to be a speaker for the Black Wealth Series, let me know what your area of expertise is. If you want me to talk to your kids, I would love that. If you want me to explain something to you, I got you. Just set some time, email me, and that's my number.
Ms. Rego, thank you for that insight and that little trip back down some of the history of Black money. I know all of us were aware of some of what you said, and I'm sure there were some things that we found out that we didn't know this evening in the detail, and I like your suggestions about coming together as a group. I always felt like we're a small percentage, but there's a lot of wealthy Black men and women in these United States of America. And if they could somehow come together and wrap their heads and arms around each other, we would have more Black banks and we wouldn't have to go someplace else to get finances for our businesses and our homes, which we know is controlled by this corporation that we call the United States of America.
Absolutely.
So if there's anybody out there that has a question or a comment, please submit those questions and comments in our Q&A or the chat, and Jacinda will make sure that those questions get answered before we say good night for the evening. But Ms. Rego, as you were speaking, and particularly around Black Wall Street and the fact that there's always been Black millionaires and rich Black neighborhoods in our community from day one. In light of what we know and what I just said, you know, if we were to come together, those of us who have more, if we could do more collectively, what impact do you think that would have on the big picture going forward?
You know, that sounds great. And I think that the answer is to do more individually for your house, for your family. And when I say that, what I mean is this. What if the reason why George Floyd was being challenged for that $20, and I don't know if it was a fake 20 or not, but what if he asked somebody for money in his family and they didn't have it and he needed some food, right? They didn't have it. It's not that they're not working every day, they just didn't have it. So my theory is that in the Black community, we have two groups. We have the umbrella holders, and then we have the people under the umbrella. The umbrella holders can be, the umbrella can be as big or as small as you want. It could be like a little amusement park umbrella where you're still getting wet, or it can be a big umbrella. And underneath that umbrella, put your family first. Right? Let's just really look out for our family. None of us are that far removed from poverty or racism that somebody in our family doesn't need help. Whether it's a single mom, somebody in a system, I don't know anybody who can't look at their own family and see somebody that needs help, that doesn't need help. So all of that is great, helping and coming together, and we have to do that. And we do that with GoFundMe's and, or, you know, things of that nature. But in my ideal world of worlds, we would really focus on creating more income so that we can help our families. And sometimes the pushback I get is, well, I help them and you know, I got to take care of me. Well, look at how you're helping them. Look at what you're doing. Helping them doesn't necessarily mean taking care of them financially. It could also be mentoring them, showing them what to do with their money. It can be having them use you as a worst case scenario. I gave out a lot of money as a model when I was young, but I learned that it's the education that I needed to give out that actually changed lives.
So that being said, and taking care of home is basically what you're saying. But there's some attitude adjustments that we need to make as a community in order to help us overcome these systemic financial disadvantages. So what are those attitude adjustments that we need to make as individuals so we can look within ourselves and start at home and build outwards?
Think bigger and be money motivated. And what I mean by that is be focused. There's nothing wrong with saying, I'm gonna work on making $500,000. I'm gonna work on 250. I'm gonna work on 6 figures. There's nothing wrong with that. We got to kind of like stop villainizing money. We got to be money motivated, because that's how it's going to occur. Because if we're not money motivated, by default, what's left is poverty, because we're fighting the system. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah,
So if we're not intentional, we're going to be left with nothing, because the system is intentional about creating poverty for us. So we got to be intentional about creating wealth. So that's the first thing. And then the second thing is to understand that if something happened, you would be distraught, right? I don't know any person that didn't cry over George Floyd. I don't know anybody, right? So if that person is in your family while you're talking all this, I gotta look out for me, you'll be distraught, especially if you could have did something. So it's changing our mindset from being observers of what's happening in our families to being participants, to understanding that people are doing the best with what they have. And if we know better, lead, show them, tell them if they're able to receive it. And if they're not, that's them, somebody else is.
So I am one of those people that believe that you have to meet people where they are if you're trying to educate them or lift them up or show them a different way of doing something. And in today's environment, and particularly in Southern California, things are so expensive. Buying a home seems out of reach for most people. So how do we keep, in particular, younger people from giving up on home ownership, from giving up on owning a business? Because the truth is, when I and most baby boomers came along, there was this thing called affirmative action. There was some things going on where certain companies, the Urban League was very big in getting people jobs back in the 70s and early 80s, because these companies were mandated to open their doors to African Americans for high level positions. Those things no longer exist in that same way. So what would you say to a younger person that doesn't think it's possible for them, even if they got a good job, to buy a home or to invest in a business?
I would say that, can you hear me? I thought I had feedback. I would say you don't really have a choice. You don't really have a choice. Like it's what we have to do. We have to create assets. I don't necessarily believe home ownership is what everyone wants right now because of the responsibilities, but we definitely need some multiple streams of cash flow. So I would say you don't really have a choice. If you want to be financially successful, if you want to have some control of your life, that's part of doing the best we can. We don't know what the next downturn will be. We had the mortgage debacle in 2008. We had COVID in 2020. We don't know what the next one will be. So all we're doing is our best. We're just doing our best. And right now, what it looks like is for the Black community is, in order for us to minimize that wealth gap, which is generational long and super by design, right? Super duper by design. We're going to have multiple streams of income. We're going to have to protect ourselves by blurring that cash flow path. And that also helps us minimize our taxes. There's a book called The Whiteness of Wealth, and it's about how the tax codes disproportionately affect Black folks because of the way we earn our money. We need to minimize our taxes. We're working harder, getting paid less, paying more taxes. It sounds crazy.
Yeah, our first session this year was about what you just said about multiple streams of income and learning to leverage your assets that you have, intellectual as well as hard assets. So there's a lot of that going on, and you're spot on when you make that statement. We also, I noticed there is a question in the Q&A. Jacinda, you want to give
Yes.
Serria that question?
Yes. So we have a question. What would be the first step in forging fraternities and sororities to invest in group insurance?
All right. So for that one, you're going to have to sneak it. What I would recommend is do some research with companies that offer the same group insurance through your employer. But, just don't make it, do it, ask about it in a way that sounds like you're asking about something that isn't going to benefit Black folks, right? You can't say, I'm looking for insurance from my historically Black college or a sorority. Just don't do it. Be as neutral, send an email, try to get some offers, and start there. But use the same organizations that provide group insurance to employers, because there's no reason why they can't provide it to community groups.
Okay. Bringing it back down to a level where most African Americans are, how should Joe or Joetta average, that person that's living from check to check, where do they start? How do they begin to invest in themselves?
So the first thing that they have to do is really look at where their money's going. One of the unfortunate realities is that being poor is expensive in America. So if they are poor, that's expensive. That means they're probably paying a lot in rent. Their car note is probably $500 to $1,000 almost. Their credit card interest rates are high. Their student loans are high. So if they're being Black and poor in America is super expensive. So you really got to try to catch your footing or get your footing. And the best way that you can do that is to minimize your overhead as much as you can. If your rent is too much and your car note is too much and your student loan is too much, you got to bring in a roommate. You gotta really sit down and look at what you can do. And you also have to make a commitment to pay yourself first. And when I say pay yourself first, I mean pay a percentage of your income, a percentage. How you doing? Pay a percentage of your income to yourself. Come hell or high water, no matter what, pay yourself first. Because what that does is that starts covering you for later when you don't know what's going to happen, but it also gives you that capital for whatever opportunity you want to take advantage of.
That pay yourself first is something that my dad drilled into me when I was growing up. And I had a mentor who, when I got my first good job, and he told me, this was before cell phones and all the tools we have now, he said, write down every dime you spend. I don't care if it's a nickel in a bubblegum machine, write it all down for a month or two. And when you go back and look at that notepad, you're going to find $200 or $300 or $400 that you could have saved. And I was diligent enough to try it, and he was absolutely right. So no matter what income level you are, you can pay yourself first.
You have to.
Yeah, yeah. The other thing that I noticed when you were speaking earlier, one of your wish lists was you mentioned using wealth to transform the system. And there was something in there that said dollars for politics.
Yeah,
Can
we
you
don't
elaborate
have
on that
enough.
for us a little more?
Yes, politicians need money, right? And that's how they're controlled, by who did what to who and when and where, right? And unfortunately, because of the way that the system has affected us and impacted our families, a lot of us don't have the extra income for backing the candidates that we need and want. But we need to. We need to get more people into the political system that are not anti-Black, that are forward thinking, that have heart. We need to get them in a system. And if we can get them in a system, then they can change the system, because it's a joke, right? You'll have a person who sues this corporation because they were doing some things that were racist, and they'll win the lawsuit. And then that corporation will file a countersuit and go to another judge, and then they'll lose. It's a joke. So we need more people in the system. We need more people just in the system. If I can have a wand, I would really focus our Black educated on doctors, lawyers, CPAs, financial people, and then I would just bankroll people into going into politics. If I could, in my wish list, I would just boom, put them right there, because from doing the Black Wealth series, I had some politicians on my show, and they Black folks in politics, they quietly change a lot. One of my speakers was Congresswoman Aisha Braveboy out of Prince George's County, which is the wealthiest majority Black county in America. And what she's been doing is they have a force that goes and reviews the past sentences of judges. So first off, they've started aggressively with every kid that was given a life sentence. They started with them first. Every kid, they started like changing those life sentences. Then they have a task force that just reviews police officers. Then they have a task force that just reviews judges. Now they're changing the result. They're putting folks in jail for criminal activity. And if I could take it one step further, I would say if you have to change a sentence, then that judge needs a ding on his record too.
Right.
But still, that's huge. That is huge. And she's doing it so quiet. Right. So I feel like if we can get more people like that on a city level, it's going to change and impact the high ups, because you can't build if you don't have a foundation. If you're trying to stack something in a white supremacist way, and then a Jacinda's down there as a district attorney swiping it away, you got no legs.
Right.
We need more.
Absolutely,
Yeah.
absolutely. And that's why educating our young people is so important. And that's something that Parkside Economic Development Corporation and the Urban League focuses a lot on, which is education, be it for students who are in high school and college, or for people who are in a business trying to grow their business and sustain their business without the knowledge and support of, since we don't get much of it from the banking system, but through organizations like the Urban League, they can encourage banks to pay a little more attention to the community that needs the help the most. So I have one more
We have
question.
several more questions.
Uh-oh, I see there are two more in the chat. Go ahead, Jacinda.
Yeah. So we have 3 more questions. First one is it wise to use equity in one's home to help fund home for offspring?
All right. First thing is that I wanted to say is banks are not our friends. Very few people are our friends. We're each other's friends. That's how it works out right now. If you were my client, would I tell you to do that? I would explore other options first. I would explore a lot of other options first. I would look at just a bunch of different stuff. And if you're thinking about that, I would say just schedule some time with me and I can help you look at it from a different way. And I understand your heart. You want to help your family create some real estate, but there might be other ways to get the same thing done. And then it might not even be real estate that will be the best thing for them.
All righty. Next question is, earlier you mentioned pay yourself first. Where would you start?
I would start in terms of a percentage, or how? Or should I just go with both?
Go with both. Go with both.
Okay. All right. So you guys, Elizabeth Warren wrote a book. Elizabeth Warren is really smart, and she wrote a book about money with her daughter. And the concept is called the healthy budget. She made it popular, but it's not a new concept. And the way it works is you're going to have 50% of your after-tax money. 50% should go towards your overhead. Your overhead is going to be your bills, your for real bills, your mortgage, your rent, your car note, your car insurance, your gas, water, power, cell phone, etc. 30% should go towards your lifestyle. That's the fun, the food, the clothes, etc. And then 20% should go towards your future. Your future can be your startup fund, your retirement, your kids' college. You can have it go up and you can have it go a little bit down. But what you want to do is you want to commit to that percentage, because when you commit to that percentage, it creates a habit, and that habit will follow you. Because what can happen is you can say, all right, you know what? I'm going to save $300 a month. And you get in this habit of saving $300 a month. Next thing you know, 10 years from now, you're making $200,000 saving $300 a month. Right. So if you can train yourself to create a percentage, that's going to be the best way to do it. Now, what was the other part of that question, Jacinda?
Oh, well,
Okay.
yeah, you got it.
Okay.
Yeah. Our last question will be, how can we better educate our young children and young adults to start saving early and the beauty of compounding interest?
Show them with yourself, because kids, you can't educate kids. You just got to lead by example, in my opinion, from what I've seen with my clients with children, right? It's not uncommon for people to have these ideas that I want my kid to do this, this, and that, but they're not doing any of it. That doesn't work. Kids are not, they're not foolish, right? But if you're not shielding them from the conversation, one of my girlfriends, she's a Plessy, one of the Plessy families. I'll use her name because she's a very big advocate, Nefertari Plessy, from the Plessy and Ferguson family. And one of the things that she does is she talks to her kids about money. She talks to them. And when they were young, we set up their little mutual fund accounts, and she started giving them their little statements, and they would read their statement. And then now they're at the point where I can actually sit down and have meetings with them. So the game is lead by example, have your financial professional sit down and treat your kids like people.
Awesome. Reverend Joe, was there anything you wanted to add?
Well, we have one closing question, and that is, what's your long-range goal that you see for the Black community?
Oh, that is so awesome. So my long-range goal is that we're able to grow and thrive and not have to experience the same trauma that we experience today. And my short-term goal is that we can do that inside of gated communities. I was reading a book called Inside the Ivory Tower by Dr. Davarian Baldwin, who's going to be my first speaker for the Black Wealth series about college sports. And he talked about how Columbia and another university, how they built these gated communities in the hood to protect themselves from the poor people. I think it needs to be the reverse. I think we need to build gated communities to protect ourselves from everyone else.
Amen to that.
Yeah. So that's my, and then let's see what happens if our kids can grow up experiencing being able to play out in the streets, being able to go to school and get good education, being able to have neighborhoods without food deserts, being able to fish in a pond, being able to learn how to grow vegetables. Like, that's the world that I would love. So when I'm a billionaire, which would be shortly, y'all, I'm just kidding.
All right.
That's Jesus. I am going to, y'all know it's going to be quietly and secretly create my gated communities where folks can just be Black and thrive.
There you go. Well, Ms. Rego, we really, really appreciate your insight, your passion, and how much you care about your community and all the things you're doing to help us grow financially and put us in a position to attain, sustain, and most importantly, pass down legacy wealth. I want to thank everybody who's been on the call tonight for your time. And I want to remind everybody that our next workshop on May 9th, join the Smart Investors Club, investing individually and collectively, which will feature another tremendous advisor, Anita Diaguilar, and Shirley Worrells, who is an investment club portfolio manager. So please tell all your friends and family to register for the upcoming workshops at laul.org/BWAARP. Ms. Rego, thank you so much. And before we leave, we're going to have some closing remarks from Cynthia Mitchell-Hurd, who is the new COO and Executive VP of the Los Angeles Urban League. Cynthia is nationally acclaimed for social impact strategist. She's a coalition builder. She's philanthropic change agent. And most recently, she served as Vice President for Business Development for the YWCA of Greater Los Angeles. In her new position, she continues to work diligently to facilitate social economic changes with at-risk communities throughout Los Angeles and America. Cynthia, this is your first time. Welcome to BWAARP.
Well, thank you, thank you, thank you. Tonight's conversation was absolutely amazing. Thank you, Ms. Rego, for your wonderful comments and conversation. And Jacinda, you know, I was watching you tonight as you were putting those questions together and farming those questions to everyone. Thank you so very much. And of course, Reverend Gerald Smith, your conversation and leadership is key to the Los Angeles Urban League. But you know, tonight's conversation, Black wealth attainment and retention, it's key. And the importance of following our economic stability, community engagement, our advocacy and education for all, providing access, especially to our youth that are coming up, watching, as you said, examples are key. But, you know, tonight's conversation really gave us an opportunity to think about what we can do to further our communities and our responsibility, not only to each other, but to the community. So thank you everyone for listening. Thank you for being a part of this. The Los Angeles Urban League uses this forum to spread the word and to continue working together to build a stronger economic community for us all, African Americans and all people of color. So thank you tonight for joining us, and we look forward to seeing you in many other conversations.
Good night, everyone. Be blessed.
Good night.